And it's great to see everyone on the phone here calling in from all over the country. Just as we get started, I think, is there anyone who's on one of these webinars for the first time? If you could just raise your hand or type in. Yeah, so welcome Bill Kaplan. Bill, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to everybody and say what organization you're coming from? I think you're muted.
Oh, there you go. Rabbi Bill Kaplan, Shalom Institute, Malibu, California. So that's very excited to be part of this and looking forward to hearing what's going on. I have to leave at 9:30 today, so I'm sorry I'm only on for about a half an hour. I'm hoping one of my staff will join in too. So, nice to meet everybody over this thing.
Yeah. So great to have you here, Rabbi Bill. And I think Rachel from Oregon Hill, you mentioned this was one of your first public calls too.
Yeah, I was on the first webinar, but not the second one.
Okay, great. Well, so good to have you back. So good to have everyone back. Did someone just call in with an 818 number?
Hello.
Hi, who is calling from 818?
This is Ben from Shalom Institute. Joel's about to join us too, I believe.
Okay, great. Okay, and so we're going to get started. If you can mute yourself while we get speaking, just so everyone can speak, so we can hear each other, but be sure to unmute yourself if you have something to say, because we will have chances to participate. I think there are a few people who are still not muted. If you could mute yourself. Great, so I'm so glad that everyone is coming to join us today. We are really lucky today to be joined by our friends at the Jewish Initiative for Animals, who are going to give us but most of the webinar today is going to be kind of an overview of the wonders of food policies, which I'll let them get into a little bit in a second. But before we start, I just wanted to take a moment and go over what's going on with the Hazon seal in general with all of the folks who are on this call right now. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what we're going to be working on. Hold on one second. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, great. I got a thumbs up from Becky. Thanks, Becky. So what we're going to do today is we'll just have a brief opening, get a chance to see the other people on the call. I hope that if you can look at who else is typed in, maybe locate some of the people who are in your area. We'll be in breakout groups later, and you'll get a chance to speak to other people who are within your geographic area to hopefully build some of those connections. I'm going to do a brief update about the seal, and the meat of it is the meat of it, the vegetarian meat of it. We'll be doing a food policy with Sarah Chandler and Melissa Hoffman, the Jewish Initiative for Animals. We'll have some time for breakout groups, and then we'll do a comeback for a little closing at the end. So just so you know about where you are with the Hazon seal timeline, we've been at a few different points. I know that everyone here, almost everyone here has submitted their project plans, the 3 projects they're going to be working on. If you haven't submitted your project plans, if you haven't decided what projects you're doing, that's important to get those project plans in soon. Along with that, we're leaning into the second consulting call of the year. So if anyone, I'll send out an email after this with an opportunity to sign up for a consulting call. If you have not submitted your project plan, you have questions about your project, you're getting stuck on what projects you want to jump into, I'm happy to talk that through with anyone and figure out what kind of projects we could be working on. And welcome to everyone who just joined us. And so the other things to keep in mind are that this is the time for project implementation. Again, I'm here as a resource. Our whole team at Hazon is here as a resource, and you also have each other. We have, I'm sure that you've seen that we have the seal listserv, and I'd encourage people, if you are having questions about where to find a resource, even if you have a big win, if you publish a story in the paper, to send that out to the listserv and be able to connect with the other excellent people who are on this phone call, who are great resources to you. And I'm just going to say a quick word about program renewal. On December 5th, we're going to have our next webinar, which is about publicizing your sustainability work, PR for sustainability. Stay tuned for more information about that. And then towards the end of the year, we have the SEAL your renewal, which is when you reflect on the past year. Right now, we're going into the Jewish New Year, and it's a time of reflection and looking back over what we've accomplished over the past year. The SEAL cycle, as of right now, follows the Gregorian calendar. So we're going to be reflecting in December about what's happened over the past year, what's gone well, and what could change in terms of your sustainability work. I'll be sending out a form. So just keep your eyes open for that. Does anyone have any questions about that? You can just jump in. Okay, great. And you can also type in the chat box or reach out if there are any questions that come up, and we'll have a chance to speak about it later. I'll speak about this more in depth at the December 5th webinar, but want everyone to keep it on their radar that we're going to be doing the renewal form. And if you have questions about any of these dates, you can go to seal.hazon.org/timeline. All of the dates are there. I'm putting it up here really big so that everyone knows. So that is a resource to you, this website, seal.hazon.org. It's a portal for everything that's there. And also, before we started, I want to mention that we're going to have some new sites joining us. Rabbi Bill Kaplan is joining us today, and we're going to have some additional new sites starting over the course of the fall. So you might see new names popping up on the listserv. You'll get to meet them more formally in December. But we are having a couple of new sites. And that's also true that if you have someone in your community who you think should join the Hazon Seal and be part of this process, have them connect to me, because we are starting to recruit for new sites. Great. And one thing that I just want to mention before we start is that I know that these past couple of weeks have been difficult for people who care about sustainability, for people who care about climate change. We've seen some of the biggest hurricanes in just one after the other. We have a couple of SEAL sites and a couple of partners who are down in South Florida and who are not joining us right now. So I just want to start by just naming the things that have happened over the past couple of weeks and how that makes the work that we're all doing more important than ever. And to say thank you to everybody who's devoting their time and energy to building healthier and more sustainable communities. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to introduce herself and Melissa and jump into the food policy work.
Thanks, Rachel. So in a minute, we're gonna be sending out a agenda, which is a Google Doc. So if you're in the Zoom, you'll see it in the chat window. And if you're not, I'm gonna ask Rachel to send it to you via email. And a couple of you might not be able to look at it while you're on the call, and you'll just see it later. It's all there. All the links you could ever possibly want are coming at you. So I'm Sarah. I'm here with my colleague, Melissa. I'm in Brooklyn and she's in Los Angeles. So I think we got, 75% of the Jewish population covered of America right there. But that's not enough. We're excited to connect to all of you out there. And if you can believe it, literally our full-time job is working with Jewish institutions on making food policies. It's kind of a dream. Obviously, a better dream would be that I wouldn't need to have this job because Jewish institutions would already have taken all their money out of factory farming. But here we are, and we get to inspire community leaders and perhaps some of the less engaged individuals in our communities to get excited about aligning their values and their food choices in Jewish life. And Melissa is our Humane Education and Animal Welfare Specialist out in LA, and my title is the CCO of JIFA, Chief Compassion Officer. If it sounds like I made it up, it's because I did. And we're super psyched to go over some of the projects we've already been working on and let you in on some of the ones that we're going to be working on in the future. And we're gonna zip through a bunch of different topics and components. We'll have some time in small groups for you to discuss with each other. We'll also have extra time at the end for questions. And one of the things Melissa and I are also going to send you is a link to sign up for individual half-hour meetings with us. So if you start thinking like, oh, I have this really specific question and I really just want to go a little further on it, you'll see a link in the doc I'm about to send you, and you can sign up right now for something in the next 2 weeks or after the holidays. So lots of abundance available for staying in touch and supporting each other. And just thanks again to Rachel and Hazon for featuring this. Our food, just as folks know, things like, heating and disposables are some of the biggest ways that we use our planet's resources, and driving, of course. Food is one of the things, and possibly the thing, that we can have the most immediate control over when we're thinking about using the Earth's resources. And as Jews, since we're already thinking so hard about where our food is from, whether it's because of kashrut or other key values that we are living out in our community, it's a great opportunity as part of any SEAL project, even if you've already chosen to focus on energy or some other area. There's a lot you can do for the Earth and, of course, for the animals and our health and more through food. So without further ado, I'm sending you all a Google Doc. Okay. I'm sending it to everyone. Hold on a second. And there we go. So this Google Doc has both a bunch of stuff that I'm going to go through. I'm going to skip over some of the things, and there's a lot of links in it. So don't get too excited clicking all the links, because then you're going to miss the content, but just know that it's all there. It's like, those conferences where you're like, can you send me the PowerPoint? I already sent you the PowerPoint, except it's a Google Doc. Okay. Oh, look, I see everyone jumping in. This is fun. All right. So what is a food policy? Another thing I just want to clarify, I'm mostly going to be talking about food policies that include animal welfare as a Jewish value, and I'm going to define both of those terms. But a lot of the ways that we're explaining things and suggesting things and training you, it can be for any food policy. So we're from the Jewish Initiative for Animals. Our main role is working on food policies that are related to eating animals and animal products. And some of you are already doing that. Some of you are focusing on other aspects of your food. So we're going to give you a lot of examples related to animals, but if you're thinking about other things like local or fair trade, a lot of this stuff is just as relevant for that. So get excited. All right, Mazel Tov. You've taken the first step by coming to this webinar in leading your community and reviving the ancient Jewish value of Tsar B'lei Chaim, preventing animal suffering through an ethical food policy. Each time you choose higher welfare animal products, don't worry, I'm going to define that, reduce meat, or highlight plant-based foods, you are showing you care for animals, human health, and the planet. And I'm going to give you some tips also towards the end, if we have time, about also the economy. There's a lot of new evidence about the importance of meat reduction for the economy. We talked about this on the Hazon Rabbis call a few months ago. What do you do when there's people in your community who aren't passionate about the environment, but might be really passionate about the economy not collapsing, whether it's the domestic economy or the international economy? There's some great arguments for doing this work just for those folks. So what are we doing here at JIFA? We're supporting institutions to align your values with your food practices, to have a written ethical food policy. And the thing that we're focusing on is to highlight animal welfare as a Jewish value. And I'm going to define animal welfare, and I'm going to define Jewish values soon, so stay tuned. And what we have seen, and the reason why we're doing this, is that doing a policy like this can build community. We've all had that one vegetarian who just wants to be mean to everyone about the amount of animal products that are being served. Or we've had that one person who's like, we got to change our meat to this thing. This process actually can bring those two people together, and we can honor still eating animals when we're sourcing them in a mindful and intentional way. And we can also honor the people in our community who are committed to plant-based diets and want to still be able to eat in their synagogue. I've been to a number of Jewish gatherings focused on plant-based foods in the past 3 years since I started doing this work. And let me tell you, of all the reasons why Jews feel alienated from mainstream spaces, not being able to eat the food is a very common one. And it's very, very common that someone's passionate about Jewish life, but they have to choose between keeping their dietary practices and being involved in Jewish life. So this, and when I say pluralism, that's what I mean, being able to accommodate a diverse group of people. And And we don't just mean the veganist common denominator. Everyone has to just go vegan, though some synagogues are choosing to do that, or vegetarian, but we're not advocating one way. We're advocating supporting you to go through a process where you align the values of your community, which I'm guessing are diverse, with your purchasing practices. All right. There's a couple of paragraphs here that are taken from the Hazon Food Guide. I think most of you have access to that. Rachel can get you a paper copy, and we have a link to the PDF version later in this document. And it's important. I find it's really important and actually really inspiring to talk about this animal welfare as a Jewish value. You know, as much as I have beautiful spins on environmental conservation as a Jewish value and honoring the earth as a Jewish value, it's actually not as explicit as kindness to animals. If we were going to have an argument, we don't need to have an argument, but if we were to have an argument, even though there's a lot to say about not destroying the earth, it's not in the halachic or legal Jewish literature to not destroy the earth. There's a lot of loopholes, and most of the Jewish teachings over the past few thousand years about not destroying the earth have to do with survival, and they also have to do with like spirituality, like, you know, you don't want to destroy the earth so you can like enjoy nature. In the case of animals, it's actually the law. It's actually a law to not do harm to animals, and there's a lot of great ways to teach that. And this is a law that unfortunately we have to revive because it's been watered down over the years. And it's not the topic of today's webinar, but we have some really high quality Jewish educational resources and teachings, both in the Midrash, the legends and lore, and also in Halakha, in the Jewish law. So it's not going to be the focus of today's webinar, but I have some links and some downloads for you. And again, if you want to follow up with me directly and say, hey, I sent this to my rabbi, or I am a rabbi, or I sent this to one of my teachers and they want to do a lesson or a unit on this, we have some great resources for that. I'm not going to go super into it, but we have some really high quality resources. Again, reviving prevention of animal cruelty as a core Jewish value. And that's one of the key parts of JIFA's mission. One more thing I want to define is this phrase, animal welfare. So most of you probably have heard the phrase animal rights, but maybe you haven't heard animal welfare. And it's important that we start teaching people this language. Animal rights has to do with the animal itself and the animal having certain rights. And most people who are using phrases like animal rights are not also advocating eating animals or eating animal products. That's my tiny definition. Whereas animal welfare is the idea that if we're going to be consuming animals, consuming animal products, we want their life, the way that they were raised, the way that they were bred, the amount of space they had, the kind of food they had, their air quality, especially because most animals we eat spend a majority of their life inside or on trucks. We want the animal welfare to be as high as possible. In JIFA, we use this language, higher welfare. It's kind of like safer sex. Like there's no such thing as safe sex, there's just safer sex. It's very similar, higher welfare. The highest welfare would be the animal gets to live its whole life out, you know, and we don't end up eating it. We don't take their milk or eggs or flesh, but that's not what we're advocating here. We're saying that if we're going to be eating animals, we want to know everything about how the animal was raised, and we can't ourselves determine that. Even those of us maybe that are farmers, we can't go visit every farm of every animal product we're gonna get. So in JIFA, one of the things that we're training folks to do, and if you've seen the Hazon Food Guide, you've seen this in there, is to look for animal welfare third-party certification. So just like you might look for an OU or an OK or another kosher symbol, you can actually look for an animal welfare. It's like a hechsher symbol on your food. We'll come back to that, but I just wanted to make sure I was defining my terms. And then the last thing I want to talk about is, what do I mean by a food policy that highlights animal welfare as a Jewish value? So first of all, as I said before, we're talking about a written food policy. This isn't like, you know, the head of the ritual committee and the executive director once sat in their office and were like, let's start buying different eggs. Yeah, now we're done. All right. Just like you might have a written policy somewhere that says no nuts in our school, or we're going to always have rice cakes for the gluten-free people, or we're always going to have a vegetarian option if we serve meat. All of these things, it's not a policy until it's written down, and then hopefully also posted on your website and hopefully sent to me, and then we can link to it from our website and celebrate you. And so we want you to have a written policy, and we're defining the policy as very, very, very broad. So you could have a policy that you write, let's say, over the next 4 months, and you have a 2-year implementation plan. One of the examples Melissa's going to mention later talks about supporting large-scale institutions like a university, cutting back meat by 20%. It doesn't mean that you write the policy on October 1st, and then on October 2nd, you've already completely implemented it. So a policy is like a vision statement, and when we work with you to actualize that policy. We've divided our policies into 3 tiers. We encourage you to start with tier 1, but we know that's not possible for everyone. So even something as simple as tier 3, which I bet a lot of you already do, you're eligible to have a written policy and for us to feature you. I'm going to review the 3 tiers and then continue from there. So tier 1 is the thing I mentioned a minute ago, sourcing higher welfare animal products. So that means that if you're going to serve meat, eggs, dairy, fish, any sort of animal product, that you are going to do that intentionally. You're going to be looking for animal welfare certifications. You're going to be looking for things like pasture raised or grass fed. And we're going to be giving you resources on how to do that and how to find that in the kosher meat industry. For those of you, that's important. Tier number 2 is reducing meat consumption. So that just means serving less meat than you currently do, or again, celebrating your current system of serving 1/3 or fewer meat meals. So if you're at a camp and you serve meat on Shabbat, plus 1 other day a week, plus barbecue nights, so that's 4 meals out of 21 meals, you're already doing meat reduction. You might have originally chosen to do it for budget, but guess what? You can have a tier 2 policy. We'll help you write it. And the idea is we want you to have it in writing. And in that writing, and we're going to show you some examples in a minute, in writing it, you're going to say animal welfare as a Jewish value. You're going to say those words in your policy. So affirming that you're not just doing it maybe for the original reason for money, but you're actually doing it because you want to highlight this piece. All right. And then the third thing is highlighting plant-based foods. This is something that, again, I mentioned pluralism before. We want to see everyone doing. This could be to accommodate people in your community who are vegan or vegetarian, but we're especially asking you to do this for the earth, for people's health, and just for more diversity. I know I've showed up at a synagogue because I wanted to hear a particular teaching on a Saturday afternoon, and literally the only thing on the table was tuna egg salad and challah rolls and Diet Coke. That was it. And, a tiny bowl with a little spinach salad would have gone a long way to make me feel welcome. And even if I was eating those eggs and tuna salad, that time of my life I was. So thinking about diversity, and there are other values that are going to inform this. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, and she's going to go over the next section.
All right, hi everyone. So I'm going to go into a little more depth about what higher welfare is, and also some of the existing resources that we can offer, Hazon can offer, and some of the work that's been done in this area. So what is a high welfare animal product? You can click, so no clicking on links. You can click on the link very quickly on the AWI webpage link. That's the Animal Welfare Institute link. And essentially what we're talking about when we say high welfare, higher welfare, is we're talking about the state of an animal when they're alive, including at the point of slaughter. So that might include their time at a breeding facility, the time being raised on a farm, their time in transport, and the point of slaughter at a processing plant. So these would be considerations the same for dairy cattle as they would be for broiler chickens, which are chickens raised for meat. And a higher welfare system, which is what AWI explains, would keep the well-being of the animal as a primary focus. Again, we're not talking about animal rights and the right of the animal to stay alive for as long as it wants and live a happy, healthy life. We're talking about in the context of a system where we're considering their welfare when they're still being raised for production. So breeding them for healthy traits rather than for physical characteristics that might promote more meat or more milk production. The farms allow animals to form natural social hierarchies and relationships because they have those preferences, same as other kinds of animals, including humans, allowing animals space outside, shelter from inclement weather and predators, and they don't rely heavily on antibiotics or mutilations to keep animals quote unquote healthy in confined systems. So if you look at that website, what you'll see is at the bottom, a couple of comparisons of different types of farming systems. And really what this is, you know, different levels of confinement. So you can see crated gestating pigs and laying hens in battery cages at the far left versus on pasture at the far right. And then in the middle, what you've probably heard a lot is cage-free eggs. That's really referring to the hens, not the eggs, because the eggs aren't alive. But the hens might be raised in cage-free conditions and still be raised indoors the majority of their life, which may or may not align with what we consider to be a higher welfare system. So it can be useful to see for ourselves, but often impossible, as Sarah said, to visit production farms in the US. It's really just not the same as, you know, small organic farms or even larger produce farms. And even with our ability to identify extremely cruel confinement or injuries with animals, it's just not that easy to identify other welfare problems unless you're an expert welfare scientist or a behaviorist. So that's why it's important to understand and take advantage of these third-party animal welfare certifications, which are actively auditing these farms, and some of them even offer free programs. These certification programs are transparent about their standards, which they list on their website, and farms that adhere to things like Certified Humane Pasture Raised for Eggs or Global Animal Partnership or GAP steps 4 and above. It's a 5-tiered system, or animal welfare approved certifications. And those 3 have some of the highest welfare products available. The Hazon seal audit references these certifications, and the food guide explains more thoroughly the standards and different levels of welfare, but it's important to keep checking their websites to see when new products are added or standards are raised even further. And when we talk about Hazon's animal welfare audits, a lot of that information will come into play. It's again outlined and spelled out even further in the food guide, especially the animal welfare focused pages, which we have linked to here in a separate PDF. And the higher welfare egg and meat pledges that you can take with Hazon on their website online are really dependent in knowing and understanding these third-party animal welfare certifications. There are other labels and other programs that might insinuate at least minimally better welfare standards than factory farmed, but the third-party animal welfare certifications are verifiably higher welfare. Another resource that I wanted to mention to you guys is the HSUS, or the Humane Society of the United States' Forward Food Program. Some of you may know about this from talking to me or Sarah previously. Some of you may just recognize the name HSUS from their famous logo that has the animals comprising the United States in silhouette. So they have their own dedicated program which trains professionals at different types of institutions, and specifically their dining staff, in plant-based culinary trainings. We actually worked with them this past year in May to work with a pilot of about 5 or 6 Jewish summer camps and training their dining staff on plant-based culinary training to produce a more integrated, a more inclusive, a more diverse menu, completely focused on putting vegetables at the center of the plate. And we're planning, hopefully, on having a much larger culinary training in Malibu, California this winter. And I want you to know about this resource because it's not just for Jewish summer camps. In fact, HSUS had never worked with summer camps before. They had worked with schools, with hospitals, with large food service companies, but this is their first foray into summer camps, and they're very excited to get involved with the Jewish community. They have their own faith outreach department, and it's kind of well known among their staff that the Jewish community is at the forefront when it comes to creating ethical food policies, wanting to do better around food and sustainability. We also tend to happen to be at the forefront of any campaigns that further protections for farmed animals. So you don't have to be a Jewish summer camp. You could be any Jewish institution. And if you're interested in finding out more about the Forward Food Program and getting your institution staff involved in a culinary training, feel free to be in touch with either me or Sarah. Okay, I'm going to move on to where it says what JIFA provides. Some of the resources that we provide, as Sarah said, are consultations, and you can feel free to sign up with either one of us to continue a conversation. We also have educational resources that we can offer. We have a Jewish community study guide, which has a diverse set of texts all about animal welfare through the ages, including some contemporary voices. We have a curriculum completely dedicated to a service learning project focused on animal welfare. It was designed specifically with B'nai Mitzvah students in mind, but has been adapted to a wide range of ages, called the ARC project. And that's free for download online, or you can order it for print. And I'll spend a minute talking about our collective power, which has been modeled very well in the work that Farm Forward, which is our umbrella organization, has done with large school systems and large food service companies, such as the UC system here in California. Thanks to the work that Farm Forward has done, the UC system has switched over the eggs that they source to certified humane eggs, which again is minimally better, at least minimally better from factory farmed system eggs, but makes a very loud statement about the kinds of products that they are willing to accept into their dining halls. Regrettably, with the exception of my alma mater, UCLA, which has decided to not use the same eggs as the rest of the UC system, but is hopefully well on its way to making that decision. Another great example of this is Bon Appetit, which has its own, again, like many large food service companies, like many other restaurants and retailers, has developed an extensive animal welfare policy, which you can read on their website. There's also now many broiler welfare. Again, broilers are the chickens raised for meat. You can look on this page to see a lot of the commitments that places have made around higher chicken welfare. And finally, when you are going to represent your organization at an event or at a conference, feel free to get in touch with us about obtaining vegan, plant-based food samples, which we've obtained for events that have happened at Yeshivat Hadar in New York, at Kibbutz Detropia in Detroit. We also worked on getting vegan egg, which is a algae-based vegan egg substitute at the 2016 Hazon Food Conference, which made some delicious latkes for Hanukkah. And there will be Hampton Creek Just Mayo. That's a play on the word just. It's just mayo and also like justice, mayo, at the upcoming Jaffe Network gathering this week. And I will turn it back over to Sarah to talk about some sample policies from Jewish institutions.
Thanks, Melissa. I want to just say one extra word about these national companies and things like the entire University of California university system. California's a little ahead of the rest of us on these things. it's a big deal that these institutions are making all of these welfare commitments for a few reasons. One is that it makes them a more attractive place for people who already have these values. And I know many of you have already thought of this in doing the Hazon seal. When you announce that your Jewish institution is doing the Hazon seal, especially if you're one of these legacy Jewish organizations like a synagogue or a JCC that might be struggling to be relevant to people of a particular generation, or even people who are baby boomers, but who, at home eat it a certain way, and then synagogue and it's tuna and egg salad every day. And so when you do these projects, even if it's a little piece here and there, you are making yourself relevant. Also, the fact that I can go on record now and say that Starbucks and McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts all have an animal welfare policy about how they're sourcing their meat and their eggs, but I can't say that my synagogue has an animal welfare policy. My synagogue is a place of faith. Is a place that I go to share my values. That's a little embarrassing. So it's just like, 10, 15 years ago when organic became popular, or even something like a cage-free egg started becoming more popular. Or, I kind of imagine if you were to show up at a synagogue tomorrow and they were like, we'll be serving veal and foie gras. You would look at the person like, this synagogue is crazy and these people are totally out of touch with reality and, what constitutes animal torture in 2017. You probably would have thought that 10 years ago. And as these large corporations are building up these systems and changing their sourcing, JIFA is also here, and this is something that our funder is very passionate about. Our funders is we want to support Jewish institutions of being as close to these same standards as possible, because we want the Jewish institutions to be interesting and relevant to a diverse population, and especially the 70% or so of folks, 63% of disaffected, unaffiliated Jews that think that institutional life is not for them. So we want to support you on that as well. I'm going to give some quick examples of different institutions that are each in a very different stage of their food policies, and we really tried to show diversity here because we want everyone to know that no one's behind. Wherever you're starting is the perfect place to start. No one's going to be judged for being where you're at. Everyone is just going to jump in where you are, and we're going to support you with doing something meaningful and quick so that you can get started, and then we'll help you make a long-term plan. All right. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Ramallah the Rockies. They were part of the Hazon camp pilot that started in 2015 that JIFA has been advising. They have a very, very elaborate food policy that existed before we were directly involved in it. So I'm not going to send you the whole thing because it's many, many pages. But they have a really interesting situation because their camp is so remote and they have to get all of their deliveries basically from one or two suppliers. And so they do a few things, like they buy all of their meat for the whole summer before camp even starts. They produce a number of the eggs that they need from their own chickens. And I know that's not possible for everyone, but just to give you an idea, they also are a mostly vegetarian camp, and that also helps them live these values. Right here, I just have a link to this beautiful piece that one of their farmers wrote this summer. Unfortunately, just a few weeks after she wrote this piece, the camp had a very destructive fire. No one was hurt, including the animals. No one was hurt, but that camp is in some major transition. So I'm not going to go too much more on what they're doing because they're still figuring out their infrastructure for next year. But it's a good example of, like, just because they can't have 100% of their eggs be free range, local, produced on site, doesn't mean they're not going to do something. And I think it's really beautiful that they symbolically figured out that all of their eggs that the chickens lay during the week goes for their Shabbat pastries. So they can at least say 100% of their Shabbat pastries are from their own chickens. They actually estimated if they wanted enough eggs for everything that they were making throughout the week, they would have to have as many chickens as campers, which I think is hilarious. So that's what they're doing out there. Next, we have B'nai Jeshurun, and we actually have a representative from B'nai Jeshurun on this call. And this is a policy that they wrote that was reflecting a bunch of pieces that they were working on. And I also included just what they've done recently. And they were able to write this without too much fanfare. There wasn't like 10 meetings to figure it out. It was basically, this is reflecting what we're up to, and we want to renew it next year. I'm going to keep going through the list here. Colorado State Hillel. This is a relatively small Hillel as Hillels go, though they do have their own building. They decided they wanted to get a chicken coop, and we discussed with them about what kind of chickens they should get. And in the end, they chose to get rescue chickens. So this is chickens that were in a factory farm system, were living in crowded conditions, and they're still laying eggs, but not as many as if they were to get new young chickens. So they get some of their eggs from those chickens. They care for them. They learn about the animals. And there's also some projects about sourcing locally. So you can see that, Colorado State Hillel. This is a picture of their chicken coop. Camp Bieber in Wisconsin. This is a camp that when they had their 50th camp reunion last year, everyone's favorite joke was that the food was the same as it was 50 years ago. So folks here, just imagine if you were serving your family and your synagogue the same thing that was eaten 50 years ago, just everything frozen and canned. So this camp was really excited to try out some new projects. And this is actually the camp that hosted our plant-based culinary training last March. And they weren't ready to make any major changes. But guess what? They tried something. They picked 2 lunches a week that they're going to have more fresh vegetables than any other meal. And they're going to do food education. They picked a certain age group of kids that were going to really focus on food education, and they jumped in. Just because they couldn't do everything doesn't mean they didn't do something. And they're going to be renewing that for something new next year. I do want to mention Isabella Freedman and Eden Village. These are 2 organizations that are well known as having very serious, very strict, very progressive food values, not just around animals, but around plants and organic and fair trade. Even Eden Village and Isabella Freedman came to us and said, how can we do better with our eggs and our meat? And we've been working with them. And if folks want some more specifics, we can tell you about it. But, we're working with everyone. And even Eden Village looked at their eggs and we said, hey, you know what? This is actually how those chickens' lives are that you're getting your eggs from. You guys can do better for not that much more money. And we help them shift their supplier. Georgetown University Hillel is a cool example also. They did like a trial run where they got all of their eggs for Passover from a particular supplier. And it also included reducing the number of eggs. They had their Passover menu, and as many of us know, Passover is eggs, eggs, eggs with a side of eggs. And they said, okay, we're going to have fewer eggs, some more nuts over here, some more vegetables over here, and we're going to make it work. And the students did not miss the eggs. They were excited about having more fresh food, more healthy food, and they instituted moving to pasture-raised eggs for the whole year. So that can also be a fun thing to do if you're not sure about which of these projects to do, or if you're afraid switching the menu is going to scare people. You can do something like that. So those are the examples I want to give. I'm not going to go into these 2 links, but I mentioned before economy, animal welfare as an economic concern. 84% of people in the business world saying that we have to be looking at how animals are raised and transported and et cetera, and sourced for food. And there's been, I follow a lot of this stuff in the news. So like there are lots of companies out there that, mayonnaise companies, actually there was funny article recently that they're afraid that the plant-based companies are taking away their business. So that's out there. And then I don't have much on it, but I will soon, and Rachel will be sure to tell you, is that the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer just came out as a documentary, which was co-narrated with him and Natalie Portman just last weekend. It was at the Telluride Film Festival. And coming to a city somewhat near many of you soon. We will keep you posted when that is announced. What we're going to do now is we're going to get into 4 breakout groups, and Rachel's going to do this magic thing where we're going to be divided into groups, and Rachel and myself and Melissa and also Becky are each going to take a group, and we're going to look at some of these questions together, and then we'll come back together.
Great. I'm going to put that into the groups in a second. First, I just want to mention that a few people typed in questions. Someone typed in a question about bringing a Shabbat tone program, and if you have thoughts about different Shabbat programs. If you want to if someone could answer that quickly while I just finish the breakout groups here.
Sure. So currently, DIFRA does not run any of our own programs. We do most of our trainings in collaboration with other organizations. So Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, Humane Society, Hazon, Shabbat Arts, which is a vegan organization. So we currently aren't budgeted / staffed to run any of our programs. We'll be speaking at the Jaffe Network Gathering this Friday, which Hazon is hosting at Pearlstone. And I think if we were to do something, it would be tagged on to something else, like everyone's already coming to the Humane Society conference or something like that. So it's a possibility, but it's not our main priority. Our main priority is to have 2 or 3 30-minute meetings, get you trained, get that policy out there, and then work within existing networks and programs to train people. The question about animal welfare friendly seals and hectares, that is in the Hazon food guide. We have it laid out really, really nicely. If you click on the link that says animal welfare focus pages, which is a certain section of the food guide, I'm going to chat it to everyone. That has a chart with the animal welfare certifications.
Great, thanks. And so we're gonna have a chance to go into breakout rooms. I'm about to hit open all rooms, so you're gonna get a little thing that pops up in front of your screen that says join a room. We'll have about 10 minutes to be in rooms, and then all those rooms are going to close. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So in the last few minutes, I wanted to just maybe have each group kind of go around and say maybe one idea and one question. If a representative from each group, either the facilitator or somebody in the group could just jump in with one idea that you heard that was exciting and one question that came up. Emily, are you speaking?
Yes, I was thinking we didn't have a food policy, but we do have one at our congregation. And sort of putting it in the context of how we could move forward with it was good. I'm seeing most of this as an educational tool, so I'm going to have to figure out how best to approach it. I'm still getting my green team together.
Great, thanks, Emily. Does someone from another group want to jump in?
I could.
Great.
I asked about suggested menus for Kiddush that we could use and propose to expose people to the issue, and the importance of doing some education or advertising around these issues.
Great. Did anyone have any good Kiddush menu suggestions?
No. Well, I heard of the quinoa spinach recipe.
Oh. Does anyone else have any basic resources for a Kiddush? I'm also going to mention that Hazon has a green Kiddush guide, which contains in it. Is that what you're going to say, Becky? Do you want to speak about that?
We have a green Kiddush guide here in Boulder. Congregation Har Hashem did a beautiful green Kiddush, and they collected all the recipes into a little booklet that I believe was shared with the SEAL program. And it was by far the best food I've ever eaten in my synagogue in like 15 years or whatever. And one of the things people talk about in relation to doing this kind of work is it's not about having less or some sort of asceticism. It generally tends to be about having fresher food, more colorful food, more variety and deliciousness. And my experience has been is that people aren't really missing anything, and they're really excited about how tasty everything is. And so, Rachel, if you don't have that, I can get it for you.
Great,
You can
yeah.
share it with Susan or anybody else who wants it, but they were delicious recipes.
Great, yeah, and I can send that out after this webinar, both the Green Kiddish Guide, which is a great resource if you haven't seen it yet, and a list of those recipes. Time for maybe one more question, maybe one more thought that came up.
Well, if nobody else, the idea of having a consortium of congregations in the area where we're in Westchester, so there's a lot of different congregations. Maybe we could get some kind of Shabbaton together and get some speakers, do some education to people who are interested in getting this happening.
I love that idea, or maybe just doing it on a Sunday or a weeknight and have like a culinary training.
Ooh.
I also am wondering if we could get together groups in certain areas to bargain collectively for lower priced, higher welfare options for our catering.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great. Well, thanks for all those thoughts, for all those ideas that came out of the groups. It sounds like you had some very fruitful conversations. Before we close out, I just wanted to make two more announcements. Well, first of all, a big thank you to Sarah and Melissa for sharing your expertise and your wisdom with all of the Hazon Seal sites. It's great to have you with us. And for all the Hazon Seal sites, Sarah and Melissa have generously offered to follow up. I talk to them all the time, and they, give me so much wisdom. So, would suggest that anyone who's looking to create a food policy would follow up with them. And then two other things. One is that you've known this, we've sent out some emails, but Hazon actually is offering right now mini grants for organizations who want to buy higher welfare eggs and meat, but are saying, oh, well, cost is a barrier. That's not something we can afford right now. So we have some mini grants that will offset the cost of buying higher welfare eggs and meat for a little while. And so if you are interested in applying for that, I'm going to send out the application link in the email after this webinar with all of the resources that I promised you. If you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. And then the last thing I want to mention is Melissa reminded me that Hazon right now is working on some resources to update our animal welfare pages on our website. Those will be ready pretty soon, which will have a pretty comprehensive building off of JIFA's kosher buying guide, and we'll have lots of resources there. Great, yeah, and Reed just typed in that we had a conversation in our group about if you're in an area where you don't think that you could get someone from the Jewish community to come out to speak about animal welfare, but you want to have a Shabbaton, you can also reach out to local animal rights, animal welfare advocates within your community, either from the Humane Society, because that's pretty much a national organization. They might not have the Jewish perspective, but could still share a lot with you and with your community during a Shabbaton.
We do have a relationship with the Factory Farming Awareness Coalition, which is a somewhat newer organization, the Humane Society, and they have a number of staff in all over the country, and I think something like half of their staff also just happen to be Jewish, and we are working with them they speak in synagogues and schools and churches and other institutions, and we're working with them so that when they are asked to speak at a synagogue, that they can weave in some of the work that JIF is doing with food policies, so we can also connect you with them and their speakers network directly. Happy to.
Great. Well, thanks so much to everyone. Does anyone have any last questions? Emily, was that a hand raise or a?
That's just an appreciation.
This is a spirit fingers. Great. So spirit fingers to everybody. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
And yes, and we will see you soon. Our next webinar is on December 5th. And if you want to sign up for a consulting call, I'll send out some more information about that. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Bye.
Spirit fingers to everyone. Bye.